Welcome to One Brooklyn, presented by Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. On this edition of One Brooklyn, Brooklyn Borough President Adams, as part of City Hall in Your Borough Week, invited city officials, deputy mayors, and others to join him on a tour of the Kensington homeless shelter on McDonald Avenue. A new model of homeless shelter that has paved the way for a community to welcome a homeless shelter and help support it, instead of standing in the way and opposing it. Because at the end of the day, a homeless shelter is there to help that community as well as other communities and help people get back on their feet.
So basically a big day with Cam. Spending the whole day with them.
So I want to welcome everybody here, and particularly our distinguished guest, our commissioner who we've worked with for so long, our deputy mayor, our councilman, our VP, who's so important to us, very supportive, and all of the staff at the Kensington, which is just one of our model shelters. And this shelter would not be so wonderful if it were not for the community. The community is here all the time, volunteering, giving, working with our staff, ensuring that the families have things going on for all the different holidays. We opened in December, and the community is here at holiday time. There were trees, there was a Santa Claus, there were gifts, all from the community. And this is what it's all about. And we are really so grateful. And Councilman, without this guy, he supported us so much and the community and bringing us all together to say, this will be okay. And it is okay.
Better than okay.
Yeah, so we're extremely grateful, and I'm going to introduce the Commissioner Steve Banks to say a few words.
I know the key is to be very brief. I'm here with my boss, the Deputy Mayor, and my colleague, Jocelyn Carter. I appreciate the leadership from my council member, Brad Lander, and my Borough President, Eric Adams, but my longtime friend and colleague and partner, Joanne, and the great people at Canva. This is a shelter which really illustrates what we are offering to homeless New Yorkers in a very new approach. And that's a partnership between government, not-for-profit provider, and the community to help get families back on their feet and reintegrated into the community. And this shelter is a great example of what a difference it makes to have a terrific provider and a terrific partnership with elected officials and a terrific partnership with the community. And that makes such a difference in welcoming our homeless neighbors who are falling on hard times and trying to get back on their feet. So we're ready to
And I just want to say one thing about our Borough President, that he spent...
We should have the baby come back and cry.
He spent a night at one of our respite bed sites, which was just, you spent the whole evening talking with people, meeting with them, and I just think it's wonderful that you did that, and it meant a lot to us, and it meant a lot to the men that you...
I think that, are there any community residents here?
Diane, you want to come on up?
Yeah, come on, you know. Because the site I spent the night at was in a synagogue that was using their space during the off hours to allow these men to come in and just treat them with the dignity that they deserve. And I think it's the combination of, you know, having the right leadership here, having a councilman that's not saying not in my backyard, but saying that this is the backyard of all the residents and we all are part of it. But most importantly, when I read about this, is the residents. You know, this was so impactful for me when I heard the residents, because it was residents like you that allowed my family to have a place. And so just make it so real. And I think that's the narrative that's lost. Everyone believed that the boisterous few who was saying we don't want to take care of our former neighbors is the tone that is complete in this city, and it is not. It is residents like you who are saying that there by the grace of God go I. And so, you know, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you personally for what you and your community is doing. And it became contagious because other folks started to realize that they had to do this. So hooray for what you guys are doing.
Well, and I just, you know, I know you're doing more and more of this throughout the borough, but you could really see in what happened around the announcement of this shelter how like the ability of our like darker angels or better angels can get mobilized, because in that first moment there really was this kind of fearful instinct by some folks to say that's not what we want. You could hear those voices, they kind of started to, and then in most cases I think people would have just said, you know, even if that wasn't how they felt, to just kind of step away, you know. It's like that's who would have been left. And in this case, a few people, Diana was one of them, and a few more people got together and say, you know what, that's not the spirit of Kensington. The spirit of Kensington, it's a really inclusive, diverse community, big Bangladeshi community, long-time neighborhood residents who've been here for generations from, you know, all, and people said, we're gonna show that kind of welcome. And they started doing it at the public meetings. It helped a lot that people knew Kamba from the Parks Up Women's Shelter and their work in Central Brooklyn. And that we had Larry Jason from the Albemarle Neighborhood Association who was willing to MC the meeting. And people showed up and said, this is who we are. We all got an opportunity. We want to make sure to do that. And that exact same set of people, some people like the public speaking more, and some people like the organizing neighbors to bring diapers and bring books and organize events. And they've just kept doing that. So the spirit to keep doing that you're doing throughout the borough is really pretty special. So thank you for continuing to be an ANA and all your neighbors to be such a part of it.
Yeah, well, there are some really great neighbors in the neighborhood. And those who were worried, they quieted it down because they see things are okay. Yes. So
Way to
we're
go.
very happy about that.
So I think Denise is going to start our tour. Denise is our director.
The Kensington is a 64-family unit housing shelter, but it not only provides shelter to those in need, but also aids families with social service assistance, job training, classes, job placement, permanent housing assistance, getting children back in school and on a solid structural foundation.
Schools as well. Our local PS 230 has been such a great support for the Kamba Kensington, and it's just overwhelming with donations and also working because our children attend those schools and having a good relationship with them and being able to answer their questions if needed and support our families' education. Our children, there's of course the big initiative making sure our children go to school.
Right.
We have Department of Education here twice a week. So they're making sure we're maintaining attendance, and our case managers are also on it as well.
Really impressive, clean, quality, you know, that make people feel that they matter. Half the game is letting folks know that they matter. You know, life has just broken the spirit of people.
We talk to folks all the time about being strength-based, and that's what we are as an agency. It's not just what the deficits and what you don't have at the moment. It's the strengths that you have and who you have and what you desire and how you pass that on to your children.
Right.
That's the greatest motivator for our families is they want better for their kids. And how do we get them to tap into that to drive them forward?
Right. That's exactly what the young lady
Yep.
said that we were just talking to.
Yep.
She was saying her children were her motivators, you know. But this is.
So this means that kids don't have to go to the library after school to do their homework. They can do their homework on site, that parents can search for jobs and look for housing. They can look for housing themselves by using the computers. So this
Clean, neat, you know. It's probably to many of these families, this is probably the best quality they have.
But the Kensington's biggest change from the old model of homeless shelters is its inclusion of the community. When originally announced in December of 2015, there was, of course, the expected anxiety from the community. But Borough President Adams and Councilmember Landers announced their support of the new kind of shelter. And then the community got involved. Some community members led efforts to change the hearts and minds of the opposition by welcoming families, by volunteering, creating welcoming packages, by donating their time and some supplies, and also by interacting with the residents. It didn't take much, but the changes were undeniable.
Well, I think that as you walk through here and you see the connection between residents, between staff, and between government, you realize the answer to the complex problem of homelessness is a simple reaction of just showing our humanity. And when you volunteer and you give back and you don't treat people as outsiders, but your former neighbors that have fallen on hard times, and thereby the grace of God goes I, you have a different mindset. And now we're seeing the best of New York when people come together, allowing people to transition from a state of despair to a state of that we all care and we can put you back on your feet. That is what the New Yorkers do.
Well, I think this shelter shows that a partnership between a great not-for-profit provider here, CAMBA, local elected official, Councilmember Lander, and the Borough President Eric Adams, and the administration can make a real difference for families with children. One of the key pieces in moving forward that we've worked on with the Borough President is designating a community coordinator in the Borough President's office to help us with engaging communities and opening additional facilities. This shelter shows what could have been in the past and what will be in the future. We're closing 360 locations and opening a smaller number of high-quality shelters like this, where homeless New Yorkers can get back on their feet and get back into the community. And the magic ingredients here are a reputable not-for-profit provider, CAMBA, a council member, Brad Lander, who showed leadership, and a borough president, Eric Adams, with his leadership, and the administration engaging with elected officials in the community and the not-for-profit provider. That's the recipe for good results for homeless families with children as part of our effort to remake the shelter system that's developed in a very haphazard way over the last 3 decades.
That concludes this edition of One Brooklyn, presented by Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on One Brooklyn.